It seems as though the couple stopped by a carnival on their wedding day. So much fun, and looking forward to seeing the energy in these pictures. They're certainly having a great time in this image here. What I'm looking at though, I know, and I've said this many times, and I'm sure we all agree that emotion often beats perfection, and we certainly have some beautiful emotion here. I'm sure you'd agree though that if we can have emotion and perfection, well, that's even better. So just a couple of things that I think we can improve this image with is that, do you see the way the bride's leaning forward? Her skin of her chest and her arms are pushing up against her body. It's making her look quite full and heavy. If we had her arm right around the groom or underneath his armpit or around his shoulder there, we would have hidden a lot of that bulk in her upper shoulders. And also, if we just ask her to lean forward or off-center a little bit, we wouldn't have had those poles running on the top of her head there, which is quite distracting. If the bride and groom did this on their own, as in they just had fun on their own without you saying or doing anything, or whether you actually directed them and got this reaction, don't be afraid to actually direct them still in the heat of the moment. What I normally do is I don't try to sound too serious. For example, in this image, if I asked them, guys, have some fun, kiss her on the cheek, and all of a sudden they were doing that on their own, but there was a couple of things that I didn't like about it, I would have said, oh guys, that's fantastic, just put your arm around him, hug him, beautiful, lean forward, off the side. And all of a sudden, then we maintain that enthusiasm by the way we've actually directed them, and we hold that expression, but we make that shot that little bit more perfect. Whether it's a crease running down a wedding album, whether it's a tree in between the bride and groom, no matter what it is, I try not to have any graphic elements dissecting a bride and groom into two. So the first thing I see here is this pole running right down right where that kiss is. Now you'd arguably say, well, it's leading your eye into the kiss. It's actually more of a distraction than leading your attention to where your eyes should go. I quite like the angle in this image. It actually really gives this image a lot of movement and a lot of spunk. But I'm looking at what this shot is all about, and that's a kiss. But I can't see the kiss because the bride's hair is in the way. Now, either we change our camera angle to the right and get the groom to come a few steps to the left, or simply just ask the bride to move all her hair to one side as the other side so we can see what's happening. I love shooting in direct sunlight with patches of shade. It really gives an image a lot of depth and a lot of drama and a lot of mood. The first thing I notice about this shot though, apart from the colour, which I love and it's very vibrant and very, very strong, I'm looking at the bride's hand. I'm wondering what she's holding. She's holding some kind of bag or something. If this was a moment that was happening and she was holding something quite distracting, I suggest we simply just crop it out. Crop nice and tight, crop above the distraction, and our eye leads us to the moment that we want rather than these elements that don't really need to be there. It feels like this shot was meant to be photographed the other way around. If the bride, let's say, had her face outside the groom's, we would have featured that really beautiful, pretty light on her. And although I don't really mind it on him, what's happening is that light is causing a shadow of his face and his nose on the bride. And look at the groom's nose. It actually looks worse. His shadow looks worse than his actually nose, or his shape of the nose is. So we have to be careful of that. But let's always look at the elements around us, use them wisely as we've done here, but use them to our fullest potential, bring out the best in it. Love the angle and the cropping of this image. I think it works really well. The drama of the sky is fantastic, and those beautiful subtle tones on that ride looks really cool too. Throwing around a couple of ideas. In this shot, we could even actually underexpose the sky by maybe 2-3 stops and have a silhouette of that ride, which can almost look quite menacing. Off-camera flash looks really cool here. Often with off-camera flash, especially when you have a couple in the foreground, I quite like the fact that if we can actually bring the flash a little bit more off to the side, just so we can create some more shadows and more texture on the detail there of the suit and the vest and the dress. It's tough using a wide-angle lens and have your subjects on the extreme corner, on the bottom left or the bottom right-hand corner, because it actually distorts them as we see here. You see how the groom looks quite bulky and the bride is just looking that little bit heavy, which often is the case when you get someone right in that corner. As much as possible, and sometimes you can't help it, do your best to just bring them off a little bit, or use a wide-angle lens, give yourself a lot of breathing space, and then crop in tighter to remove the distortion. Just one more thing here, I'm really distracted the fact that I can't see the bride's left hand. Do you see how it's cropped on the forearm there, and also we can't see her fingers? It looks that little bit awkward. I feel like I want to see more of it. I love the expression though, and love the connection between the bride and the groom. Nice choice to make this shot in black and white. And I love the suggestion of those signs in the background where we see, yes, big prizes and whopper. I think it's quite fun. I like the fact that also we can actually see the kiss in this shot. Also using a wide angle lens here as we discussed before, do you see that little bit of a distortion of the groom? His head looks quite small there, and then we have this sort of big shoulder and body just protruding out a little bit, which is a little bit distracting. And just looking at the bride as well, do you see how her right arm is pressed up against her body? It makes her arm look a little bit fuller. Even a slight shoulder back and slightly bring that arm off the body, and it makes it look even slimmer than it already is. I'm also thinking just a lower camera angle would have been more appropriate. Do you sort of see how those dissecting lines there of the top of those signs in the background dissect the bride and groom a little bit? They're sort of at that same sort of level, and it's a bit distracting. A lower camera angle would have just got the bride and groom elevated a little bit and just brought them off that line, and it would help support the image rather than actually compete for your attention. This is a really fun shot. Love the colour, love the expression and the mood, and the fact that we have the bride and groom off centre a little bit really works here. Job well done, beautiful. I love those subtle colours in the background, really pretty, and also that beautiful lighting on the bride's face is simply gorgeous. If you've listened to my previous critiques, you would have heard me actually say about actually getting the bride and groom to lean forward to the camera if you're actually shooting from a low camera angle, because it corrects the perspective. This is a really good example of showing you good and bad here. Do you see the way the bride is leaning forward and she's actually centered to the camera with a wide angle lens? She doesn't look really distorted. She doesn't look too bad because she's leaning forward. Now the groom, on the other hand, has his shoulder to the left of the frame with a wide angle lens, so it makes him look really, really big. And do you see now how his head is just disappearing? Now, of course, it's being hidden by the bride's face, but the proportion of it looks a little bit weird. So just to reiterate, get the bride and groom to lean forward to correct the perspective of, let's say, your low camera angle and the fact that you have a wide angle lens, and just try to bring their bodies just off the corner of the frame, otherwise they'll look a little bit distorted. Just looking at the expression on the bride's face there, although she looks gorgeous, absolutely beautiful, I'm just not quite believing that moment so much. It looks that little bit forced, just bordering on it. Even a slight part in her lips just gives me a suggestion that she's actually enjoying that moment, or a subtle giggle or something. Just something is missing. Perhaps if I saw more of a suggestion of the groom to balance up with the bride, I'm not too sure, but just something is missing. Love the dramatic, cool tones of the sky contrasting with the beautiful warmth of the couple in the foreground. We've already talked about placing a couple in the corner, so I'm not going to go too much on about that, but let's look at the expression independently. It just seems to be a moment between a moment, which often I quite like, but this somehow just looks that little bit tentative. When I'm in a situation like this, I like to diagnose the scene and actually photograph accordingly. In other words, as we see here, we have a dramatic sky, we have those romantic lights, so I'm thinking the shot should be quite dramatic as well. It should be romantic as well. I'm not sure if, let's say, the smile really suits here, although we do have a fun theme running across these images. If the photographer had a tripod, it would have been really cool to slow the shutter speed down, put the camera on a tripod, and have, like, let's say, maybe a 5-10 second exposure to have the movement of the lights of the Ferris wheel. That would have been really fun to see. I don't normally like flare in shots because I just think it's a glorified mistake, but I think it works here. It really goes with the energy and the movement of the lights in the background there. Now, quite like the kiss, but the more I look at it, the more it seems like the roles are reversed here. Look at the way the bride is holding the groom. It's almost strong and aggressively, almost like the way a guy would kiss a girl. And look at the groom now. He's looking quite submissive in the way he's closing his eyes and leaning back. He looks a little bit feminine. And also his left hand is almost draped across the ride there. I would just look at the body language and refine to suit the couple and the individuals. Don't know whether this shot was achieved afterwards in post-production or it was actually done on the day there with the Polaroids. But looking at this actual image independently, I think it's quite fun. Love the suggestion of the popcorn there with those long shadows and the Polaroids just placed there and that cotton candy. Quite fun, and it could be a cute little start or the end of their wedding album. So nice little touch there. So overall, a great sense of fun and energy. I'm loving the feeling behind these shots. The couple seem to really work well together. I like the use of lighting and the dramatic effects in the background there. Just want the photographer here to work on their posing and the refinement of the posing. Just watch those angles and body parts and body shapes on the corner of a wide-angle lens shot. And also just work with different perspectives of where we place the camera. So whether we shoot down low and up high or so on, let's really work with the strengths of the couple and also not forgetting in hiding their weaknesses.